Welcome to another edition of Two Irish Guys Discussing Software. Here we are in Dublin again, myself and Brendan Walsh, my good friend. It is episode 30. We're here to talk about something that's very dear to my heart, high performance.
Excellent.
Yeah, we're delighted to hear that. So yeah, January, how are you doing?
I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still dark outside. We're recording early.
I know. We're recording early because we've a cracking guest who's going to join us in a little bit. A very well-known individual in Ireland, a guy called Gavin. I'll introduce him properly later on, but Jim knows all about high performance. He is a All-Ireland football winner with Dublin. He is the most successful ever football manager ever to coach a All-Ireland winning team, having won 6 All-Irelands and 5 of them in a row. Yeah, and he is Assistant Director now of the Irish Aviation Authority, and he's going to chat to us about high performance. We might link that back to all our favourite friends in the software world. See, can he give sound advice? We've been trying to get these guys to listen to our show now for the last couple of years. I'm not sure how many of our listeners actually come from the software industry. Please do let us know. We'd love to hear from you. But and do you like what we talk about? Yeah, that's the plan. But before we get into the meat of it, it's January. We're starting 2022. We might talk a little bit about some of the predictions we might think about what's going to happen performance-wise in 2022 later. But what's happening? I'll tell you what I'm doing next week.
You're on the road, probably.
Yes.
You're always travelling.
Well, this will be my second trip of the year. I was in Paris last week, and the little trip. But next week, I'm doing a 2-week tour to the US of A, and I'm flying into Boston. And I'm going to meet a couple of customers in Boston, a couple of contacts in Boston, and then I'm going to Washington, D.C. Never been, by the way. Have you ever been to Washington, D.C.?
No, I've flown in.
Have you?
But yeah, I have, but then left.
That's it. Reagan, Dulles.
Dulles.
Okay, yeah. I made a
route to somewhere else.
I made a schoolboy error. Yeah. Apparently, Reagan is the closer airport, easier to get in and out of. Dulles is a little further away.
I think Aer Lingus flies to Dulles, maybe.
Yeah. I think it's the bigger airport. Yeah.
But no, that's just with travel. Sometimes you fly places that are really interesting, and then you leave them to go to some other place, other location.
I'd love to spend more time there. So we're going over. Do you know what? Actually, one of the things we're doing, we talked about on the show, the free ICT organisation we have. I'm involved in here in Europe. We're actually going to set up a similar organisation in the US. Yeah.
A bit of lobbying with the lawmakers. Is that it?
The issues are the same. It's the high maintenance costs. It's the end of support whenever they feel like it. It's the forced upgrades and migration. So we're gonna talk to legislators in Washington. We've got a couple of meetings lined up. I won't say who we're going to talk to, just in case we reveal it to the opposition. But we're going to go in town. Mm-hmm. We're going to have a chat. We're going to talk about the benefits of the circular economy. And this is a good time to talk to Washington. Might someday get to meet Lena Khan. She's such a famous person now. But there's so many interesting people on the Hill, as they call it. I'm going to be on the Hill. So looking forward to that.
Yeah. It is a hill.
Well, is it?
Is that what they call it?
That's what they call it. Isn't it the Hill?
Or is it because by the time you get to the top, it's something to do with climbing up the corporate ladder or something?
Well, do you know what now? I'll tell you what when
Let's
I come.
Find out.
Well, I'm going to come back and tell you all about that when I come back.
Take some pictures.
Yeah. So leaving DC and then heading to Phoenix, going to Seattle, going to LA, back to our office in Dallas, and then home.
Holy God!
Yeah,
that is quite a trip.
That's a nice trip, isn't it?
Yeah, East Coast, West Coast.
And the last time I went, I managed to bring home some bit of COVID, sadly.
Great.
Which is back in November.
Well, you won't bring it home this time then,
no.
Leave it behind.
No, I think I'm fully
we're not going to talk about that now.
Yeah, no, we'll leave all that behind. So that's why. What about you?
Right.
Tell us a little bit about you.
Speaking of Paris, I'm heading to Paris.
Yeah.
For an event with one of the Irish export agencies, Enterprise Ireland, are having an event on the Monday 31st. So I'm heading over to that because we're one of their biggest fans, and meeting some customers over there as well, some customers, some partners. So that's the plan. My New Year's resolution,
right?
Meet more people. I'm kind of fed up with the digital world.
I know everybody is. Everybody is, yeah.
And meeting people behind on screens and stuff. So it's exhausting.
Well, here's something to say to you, because I was over there last week. And the numbers, like the COVID numbers, are huge. And obviously, we wouldn't talk about COVID numbers, but it is causing some. That's what's causing the challenges.
It's topical, right?
We'll say it and park it.
Yeah.
But what was really interesting, and I think you'll find this, I'm hoping I'm going to find the same in the US, but what I had expected that actually really no one's going to meet. Everybody wanted to meet. Now, everyone's being careful and all that sort of stuff, but actually, and there's kind of stringent rules over there, but everybody still wants to meet. Everybody wants to do business. So actually, I think you're going to find, and I'm hoping the next 2 weeks in the US will be the same. So despite some of the challenges, fingers crossed coming out of this.
Well, I want to meet them, so hopefully they want to meet me. But so just a couple of days, and then but lots of trips coming up actually. So the good thing about what's happening at the moment, we've been starved of trade shows, and we are ultimately a software-led company that's behind.
Well, we're going to talk a little about sustainability and some of the things people say, why do you have to go? But you see, you have to get the combination. You can't not travel.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Regardless of whether you think the airline industry, I mean, the IT industry has just as similar carbon footprint as, if we talked about this before, as the IT industry. And the IT industry will surpass it. But we're not that we want to travel for the sake of travel, but you have to. You
got to meet people.
Yeah,
and connect.
It's not the same. Well, we're going to talk about. It's part of the high performance engagement, I'd imagine. You gotta get out there.
Absolutely, And so hopefully our customers and partners want to meet us. So you got to mix it up, a bit of virtual, but lots of trade shows actually coming up. Across the months, across North America, which our US team.
And we've got a new colleague in France, and we got more colleagues coming in Germany and France. So so we'll have to go and see him.
Well, I'm going to be seeing him. When I go to Paris.
We want a Leon as well.
We do, colleague in Leon, on our team. So, so looking forward to getting out there over the next few months.
So tell us, let's have a chat about what's going on in the software world. I mean, big news this week.
Well, lots of big news. So we've got, what have we got? We've got Metaverse, we've got acquisitions, we have declining revenues, we've got salacious rumor, we've got allegation, we've got everything on the show actually.
Excellent.
So I'm going to have to say allegedly, and as reported by other news agencies quite a few times, otherwise we'll end up behind in the dock. So big. I think the biggest thing that's happened this week, big news, is really the Blockbuster announcement by Microsoft that it's going to acquire Activision.
Yeah, it's huge. Call of Duty, we all know that game. My son now is getting into that.
Well, during lockdown, it was all about Call of Duty, and it was nothing to do with me. But the roars and screams and shouts and hollers from my son's bedroom meant Call of Duty was being played. But Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, Activision.
What are they paying?
They're paying, just a little under $70 billion. $70 billion. $70 billion.
That's their biggest acquisition, has to be, is it?
Yeah, it certainly is. $95 a share, although Activision wasn't trading, it was trading just around $90 a share, not actually at $95 a share when I last looked at it last night. So that's kind of saying something, but it's a big money.
What is it? Is it they want to get into the likes of my 11-year-old who shouldn't be playing Call of Duty? Is that they want the youth market?
Yeah, they already have a big, obviously a big gaming division, Microsoft Gaming. They've got the Xbox console, and they've got subscription access to many titles.
Let's be honest, their products are really boring. Like, it's just yawn fest. It's like Teams, Outlook, Windows,
Surface, computers.
You'd fall asleep talking about it. This is exciting stuff. I know it's interesting to you and I because we're in the industry. But if we talk to people who are not in our industry, they fall asleep when we start talking about Microsoft.
This is the battle for the metaverse. Right? It's Facebook renamed itself Meta. Recently, as it's kind of
just before it gets broken up.
So it's about virtual reality. It's about connected virtual communities, engagement online. Satya Nadella's strategy is focusing on content, community, and cloud. So they're doing very well in the cloud. Content, they had a failed attempt to buy TikTok, you might recall, and I think Pinterest as well. Recently, so that kind of didn't work, trying to get into the content world. So they're going after the community, but they're going after the meta community. So this is part of their plan to become, gaming is absolutely massive. They're now the third largest gaming company in the world. So Microsoft are now a gaming company, and they've got the firepower to do it.
Big money in that. Actually, it brings them it opens up whole sorts of doors into kind of online currencies, and because there's huge stuff going on there. Yeah, that end up being a bank.
So they're ahead of Nintendo in terms of the gaming companies, which is incredible. But they're just behind Sony, who are I think the second largest gaming company in the world. And Sony, on the back of this, believe it or not, this is incredible. But they lost $20 billion off their valuation on the back of Microsoft. Sony did. Because it was seen by the market that Microsoft have such firepower when it comes to buying companies. And, they're looking at Disney and Comcast and saying these guys don't have a hope. They just don't have the firepower. Yeah. And so this is getting looked at.
With the cash they're generating and the valuations of the company. I mean, Microsoft is such a high value company.
Like they're a $2 trillion company, Comcast and Disney are probably $300 billion companies. They just don't have the firepower. So this is being looked at in DC, where you're going, because it's being seen as potentially, is there antitrust, is there anti-competitiveness going on? So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
I'll report back when I come back.
You report back.
And tell me, was there another $95 a share purchase as well?
$95 a share seems to be popular. Yeah. So Oracle have splashed out in the new year as well, spending just under $30 billion on Cerner, which is the healthcare software business. $95 per share, coincidentally, as well. So some cynics like ourselves would say that this is a very expensive way to buy a customer, because what you might not know is Cerner used to run its kind of payloads and its data processing in its own data centers. But a couple of years ago, it started moving its payloads to Amazon, actually running on Oracle, but in the Amazon cloud. So now that's all going to change. It's all going to shift over to the Oracle cloud. So now you'll have very big business, winning very big contracts, running in Oracle Cloud. So it's going to be its anchor asset to further expand into the market. But interestingly, it's saying, claiming that it's a good thing for the health sector. It's going to free up time of the clinicians who spend too much time kind of punching in information and manually retrieving it.
I mean, that's the story.
It'll be voice activated.
That's the story. I mean, we know when these big behemoths buy these companies, they really don't do a huge amount with them. I mean, there's very little value there. Let's not even go down that road.
So we're just buying a customer.
This is buying a customer, and a great day for the Cerner shareholders.
Yeah, as they did with Zoom. They talked up Zoom. I remember about a year ago they were talking up Zoom and what a great company it was. But only because they were trying to get Zoom to move its processing from Amazon into Oracle. So,
Well, look, we love talking about Oracle. We won't talk about Larry this week. Something we haven't spoken about for ages, I must ask you. What's going on in the SAP world?
SAP. I mean, it's not particularly exciting. They did announce their...
they heard they would start to make a little bit of progress now.
Well, they're making, fair. They are. I mean, they came up with this, catchy kind of strapline, Rise... with SAP, it kind of feels kind of somewhat, evangelical maybe, but Rise, like the Phoenix, it's about, how do you shift your old legacy on-prem, tired SAP environments to the cloud? So they've kind of got this, lift and shift. Yeah. We can do it fast, better, faster, cheaper. They call it Rise. And it seems to have, even though Larry... Ellison kind of knocks it and always claims that he's winning more customers and that going to his cloud than the SAP cloud. It looks like it's paying off. Yeah, their revenues are up. Their cloud is up 26%. Their overall revenues are up 6%. They haven't made any acquisitions, but Rise seems to be giving them a little bit of a lift. Good. Pardon the pun. So one company we don't tend to talk about quite a lot, but I'm going to start introducing it a bit more frequently, is HCL. Yeah. So, and why? Because, they're now in our crosshairs. They acquired assets from IBM. So we don't mention them a lot in the pod. Well, they're quite a diverse company as well. They are, very big company, and they've also had, to be fair to them, very good Q3 results, which ended in 2017. But, like all our friends in the big tech sector, it doesn't come without some kind of shadow or cloud. Yeah. Right. And not the cloud in the technology cloud. They're leading some real type of cloud. Yeah. So they're having troubles with attrition. Their attrition rates, have doubled to almost 20%. Yeah. And for a company like HCL with over 100,000 employees, that's a lot of people, right? 20% per annum? Per annum. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So, that's 20,000, 100,000. Yeah. Okay. That's a lot of employees. So they've had to replace those, resulting in very high recruitment costs. So it's impacted their margins. And one of the reasons... I heard they were... they called... Someone called them recently
They're the ugly duckling, is it? Or there's their name they were given? That was the Kindle, was it?
That was Kindle.
Okay,
Kindle's
I'm
the
giving
other
it.
one,
Yeah, you're going to get to those guys
yeah.
at some stage as well.
But, so one of the reasons that HCL seem to be suffering this attrition is because of clawback of bonuses. So they award people bonuses. They might prepay them for good reason, and then they say, well, we're going to, so then they leave and they start to claw them back. Yeah. So they're kind of, there's kind of leaving a bit of a nasty smell around the place. But one HCL executive said that the bonus program was just misunderstood, and actually it was intended to be employee friendly. Except the employees don't see it that way.
This sounds like the sort of stuff we've seen before in a court case in California. And speaking of the court case in California, our friends who were involved in that court case with an employee, was that California, IBM?
Oh, I mean,
and bonuses.
Like which one? I mean, salespeople not being paid their commission, age discrimination.
How are IBM doing? Because I saw Barron's. The investment guys who kind of pick stocks and their stock pick, one of their stock picks for 2022 as we move on to looking toward this year, is IBM. They were saying that IBM could be one of the big turnaround stories for 2022. They had a cover story calling it Microsoft Junior.
Okay.
Would you believe, yeah?
Right.
And one of the analysts, even though Wall Street tends to be quite skeptical about IBM, as we often do ourselves, we are quite critical here sometimes, and we like to see a bit different strategy. But a Bank of American global research guy called Wamsi Mohan compared Arvind Krishna to Satya Nadella.
Right.
Yeah, Satya Nadella, sorry. I should say, it's incredible.
That is, but that there isn't general consensus around that.
I know. How come they're trading at they're trading at 11 times, or at least they were at the beginning of the year. The tech industry 80 times,
up to 80 times. Yeah. So, but I mean, UBS have downgraded the stock to a sell. So there's inconsistency there in terms of who you listen to. I mean, IBM is essentially a second tier stock now. Yeah. Okay. Like Satya Nadella is, in soccer terms, Pep Guardiola, but Arvind Krishna isn't quite there yet. Yeah, they're a second tier stock. I mean, they're not the highest performer when it comes to the cloud. During the cloud era, Ginny Rometty was making a hames of the company. The stock was declining. They've got $50 billion of long term debt. They've got single digit revenue growth. Their share price isn't climbing very high, maybe 9% compared to Oracle, which is up 40%. So compared to their peers, it's a bit of a down squib.
And the offload of Kindle, I touched on here. That is the ugly duckling. Apologies,
it is the ugly duckling.
How could I call HCL the ugly duckling? Apologies, HCL.
It was a good idea to spin it off or to get it out. I mean,
but what is it?
But its stock price has dropped from $40 to $17, and that's mainly because the shareholders who acquired the stock,
they sold them.
They dumped them.
And nobody wanted them.
There was a dumping spree. But that business has been in decline as well, as everybody knows, for a long time.
But we talked about this before. There's value in that company.
There's potentially value, yeah. I mean, they're trading at a value of about just below $5 billion off revenues of almost $20 billion.
Yeah.
So if they can turn it around, there is a turnaround story there. I think there's more of a turnaround story for Kindle
than there is for IBM.
I mean, IBM have been talking about this resurgence for, probably a couple of years,
But Arvind was on TV. He was on CNBC there just about a week ago, I think it was, and last week, and he was talking about they were on this just 100 kind of companies that are the most just and fair in the marketplace. And he was talking about what was fascinating. He was talking about them being serious about sustainability. He mentioned sustainability is actually 6 times in a 5-minute interview. I've never actually heard IBM talk about sustainability. It's interesting that these guys are talking about it. They've talked about IBM bringing benefits to society. They're talking about going to net zero by 2030. I don't know how they're going to do that. I just thought it was interesting that this conversation, the conversation seems to be shifting. You're right though about IBM. What's the turnaround strategy? We've talked about it before. The mainframe, which is such a profitable line of business, declining customers. It's like around the edges. It just seems to be like one of those things you drop in your glass that. Those Alka-Seltzers but it dissolves really slowly. You know what I mean?
There's a lot of fizz at the beginning, and then it kind of peters out.
Yeah.
So it's hard to see. I mean, they're definitely coming from behind. I mean, the sustainability is top of mind for many CIOs, of course. So he probably has to say it, but and hopefully he's not treating sustainability in the same way that Larry Ellison is treating the healthcare sector. That it's just something you have to say.
It definitely seemed like. I mean, it was such a surprise to me. I mean, I know we talked about it on the last show about some of the stuff I've seen over in France with the push for digital sobriety and IT sustainability. That's a big movement. But obviously, it seems to be much more so. I mean, you hear about it from many companies across the board, just general sustainability, but you don't hear much certainly from the legacy vendors. Haven't heard Larry talk about it yet. I'm sure he'll be talking about it at some stage. There was actually a piece in the Wall Street Journal there about a week or 10 days ago, and they did a kind of a CIO review. What was interesting is that this is becoming increasingly now top of mind for CIOs in their business, because they're under pressure now. They're under pressure. I mean, for years we've been looking at, there's levels of greenwashing going on where they replace old technology with new technology that's more efficient. And it's a bit like the Moore's Law. Over time, you get to a point where actually that you've got to stop doing that, all right? And I think one of the things was interesting from the report was talking about that their optimization of the existing data centers is a big push for them. I think that plays well for the organization that we are and the industry we're in, because to extend the life of the technology assets you have in a data center, you're going to have to figure out what changes do I really don't need to make to the environment, and not everything can move to the cloud. The cloud obviously can help because some of the new data centers are more efficient, but the workloads are increasing all the time. So it's not like they can just take existing workloads and move them. And they're looking obviously at ways to reduce energy consumption. We've had things like green coding, but what we know ourselves in the marketplace, increasingly they're saying, okay, how do we avoid making any changes? Once we get to a point where actually we can't structurally change what's in the data, we've got to a point where the incremental changes are not going to make any difference. I think it's going to be interesting. I think sustainability, we talked last year about predictions. This year, I think you're going to see, we've seen it in January. I think when we review this throughout the year, we're going to see sustainability absolutely top of mind for executives across the board. I think it augurs well for us. I must tell you, I was looking back at our podcast in January when we were talking about predictions for 2021. So remember we talked about regulation. Yeah, we talked about regulation. I'm not even sure if the Lena Khan story came out at that stage. Maybe it had. And we talked about there was going to be more and more activity in that area. But interestingly enough, one of the things I did say was China. Yeah, China. So in China, I said that they would do more in regulation. So here's the thing. We look at them in just 12 months. China has gone from being a kind of a cautious and tolerant to something that's much more severe. Okay, there's a huge shift towards enforcement of rules. Their competition policy is now much more stringent than you see. Now, some of it's presented, their antitrust laws, etc., presented as a kind of protection of the political environment. But actually, regardless of the reasons, my prediction has come true.
Yeah, okay, already.
Are you impressed?
Already, before the end of January.
No, that was last year's prediction. That was last year's prediction.
I think this year's prediction was pretty similar, but
no, I didn't say that.
There's going to be more legislation and more oversight from DC lawyers.
I've just told it's sustainability. It's sustainability. Yeah, it's sustainability and high performance. High performance. Yeah, they are going to be the thing.
Well, that's true, and there's going to be a bit of a there's going to be an impact on high performers, and we're going to. I think going back to IBM or whoever it is, Microsoft, SAP, Salesforce, any of these guys, I think high performance and performance is going to be under a lot of scrutiny. I mean, we're already seeing at the beginning of the year, the NASDAQ under pressure, interest rates inflation is increasing. I think it's at a 47-year historic high because of everything. The price of everything is increasing. The price of trucks, cars, second-hand trucks, food, homes. Obviously, supply chains are under pressure. Wage inflation, and that's going to impact, I believe, heavily on the tech stocks. And I think we'll see that. So, and I think only those who can outperform and the high performers will be rewarded. So it'll be interesting to see.
Well,
which I think was a prediction I made at the beginning of January about tech stocks will be under pressure and might see be a shift away from the to tech stocks to other stocks.
Well, here's a fist bump to our both of our predictions. We'll use that opportunity to bring Jim into the conversation. Jim, I opened the podcast. I present a little bit about your background. Jim Gavin, welcome. How are you? Are you there? Can we hear you?
Good morning, Tomás. Good morning, Brendan. Can you see me and hear me?
Yeah, can. You have us up far. You have us up far too early. We're not morning people here. You've probably done a whole day's work.
Yeah, the aviation sector, as both of you have travelled a lot, we start very early. I can imagine you two guys in the red-eye flights. In the corner going back to sleep.
The only difference, Jim, is that we only have to do that maybe once a week or a couple of times a month. You've got to do it every day of the week. So, Jim, just for our listeners, Jim, I introduced you earlier as Assistant Director of the Irish Aviation Authority, but I guess it's fair to say what you're best known for is your career as both a player, as an All-Ireland winner in the 1990s, and more recently until 2019, as and you must be sick of listening to this, but the most successful Gaelic football manager ever in terms of actually success. Was it 19 finals you won out of 21? I don't think there's probably a coach in any team sport at elite level that's done anything anywhere. I mean, go give me one of those, but you probably know them if they exist. But
it was 18 out of 21. 18. But I'll take, if you want to give me 19, I'm fine with that as well. I
think I was counting on a burned cup, I think there maybe.
yeah. But yeah, it's interesting, like success. Some people measure success in terms of trophies and awards and whatnot. But there's other little successes that you'll have along the way that, that aren't that tangible. I get what you're saying, in terms of the trophies, but there's a lot of managers out there who are with teams maybe in the lower divisions who, in that context, are having success. They might get a promotion to the division up, or they might just have a really good season and they play good football, and so it's different. But I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, and actually, that's you make a very, very fair point, Jim, because I mean, bringing it to the business context. Businesses, not everybody is we've been talking earlier about Microsoft, and they're able to spend $70 billion on buying a company. Oracle spending $25 billion. We track stocks here in the show regularly and looking at the likes of the valuations in Apple and all these companies, and it seems that that's the only metric that we hear about in the media. But you're right. I think your point is very valid, isn't it? Every company has different ways should have a different way of measuring success in the short term, in the long term. Isn't it all about moving the ball up the field, as they might say in American football parlance, isn't it?
It is indeed, yeah. That is the key, and I suppose that when we speak about the non-tangible pieces, the softer pieces of leadership, we look at the hard skills, the technical competence of your staff, which is really, like, that's crucial. In IT, in your sector, being finance, being aviation, you have to have those hard skills that you pick up from your education, you pick up from your experience, you pick up from your ongoing training, your continuous training. But the softer skills sometimes are harder to measure. And in the high-performing teams that I've seen, those high-performing players, leaders, have those softer skills, be it good listening skills, adaptability, and indeed emotional intelligence, and like they do complement each other. You need the hard skills, from what I've seen from high performing teams and leaders and organizations. You need a softer side of it as well. So emotional intelligence, self-motivation, self-awareness, empathy, good social skills, all of those in a team dynamic you do need to have, and they do work in concert with each other. They're complementary, and I don't think one trumps the other. You need both in terms of the measuring piece. That softer side, some organizations don't invest heavily enough into it. We'll invest in our people in terms of their technical skill set. The softer skills, are equally as important, and they're sometimes harder to measure, Tomás, and I suppose that's a challenge for any leadership group is to have faith that they are important and crucial for the success of your organization. Because you get those bit rights, as Bill Walsh, the great 49ers coach, says, and hi to everybody in in the US who might be looking at this later on this day. Bill Walsh, the great 49ers coach, did say, get that process right, the softer skills, the harder skills, and the results will look after themselves, as in your share price, your profits.
Yeah, and one of the things we do, and we've been doing it for the last couple of years on this, since we started this show, and some of it's tongue in cheek and deliberately for a bit of entertainment, but there's a serious angle to it, looking at what used to be the champions of the industry, the IBM, Oracle, SAP. I mean, you go back 10, 12 years ago. I mean, they're still huge companies, but then they're not the ones winning the trophies anymore, right? And we're quite critical of some of their behavior. It comes across as often arrogant. It comes across as they don't care about their customers anymore. They've almost feel like, and we know this from when we go on the street or we go to conferences and we hear back from the customers, and indeed in the media talk about this regularly now these days, that the way they're treated is appalling. Yet it just seems to me that they feel that this is behavior they're entitled to exhibit. And it's almost the exact opposite of what you just described there.
Having that growth mindset is a crucial bit. You asked me to I know we might cover it towards the end, some books. I brought some books into my office this morning. Here's a well-worn copy of Napoleon the Great. It's really, really, really great reading. You can see there it's well worn.
I got it for Christmas, Jim. You'd be glad to know, and I've started it. Yes, I did. I asked for it from Santa.
Oh, isn't he? It's amazing how Santa knows what you want.
Yeah, he's amazing. Yeah.
You must have been very good last year.
I was. Thanks, Jim.
So when you speak about those iconic organizations, when you speak about iconic leaders like Napoleon, the Roman Empire, the British Empire, a lot of them have crumbled from lack of humility, and that's what, as a student of military history, that's what you see. And from an aviation perspective, and which is the high performing transport industry, the last thing you want to hear is in an organization is, well, that's the way we always do things. That fixed mindset. That's just not what you want to hear.
How does that set in, Jim? How do organizations end up like that?
Yeah, they get complacent, they get comfortable in their skin, and when you feel safe, you are unsafe. And from a sporting perspective, as a head coach of a football team, or from somebody who's involved in the aviation sector, that complacency or overconfidence is probably a better way to describe it. When you get overconfident, that's when you get lulled into a sense of safety. But when you feel safe, as I said, you are unsafe, and it's not in a board meeting, not having the 10th man to say, well, maybe is that what we should be doing, or do you do your pre-mortems? Do you ask the what ifs? Do you challenge yourselves enough in terms of your strategy? Do you turn it upside down, inside out, which we do in the football team? Because understanding that your competitors, be it in the sporting or business context, are, you would think the high performers are doing the exact same. And if you keep doing, like from a football team perspective, again, if you keep doing what you always did, you will be overtaken, because teams are, they're consistently adapting and evolving and looking for that little edge. So when you think that, well, what we did in last year's season, or last year's strategy, or last year's business plan will be good enough for next year, well, of course, there's huge amounts of elements that are, and you take along the good stuff, and you look back and you say, okay, what new things did I learn? And maybe what are things that we need to reemphasize in the first quarter of last year that, we fell off message a little bit. We just need to bring that back up to the surface. So there's a continuum of involvement. So it's not just, okay, the business plan for, and that the business plan or the game plan for 2018 will be the same for 2019, and the same for 21, and the same for 22. There is that challenge, like Charles Hanley wrote in his seminal works, the Empty Raincoat, about that sigmoid curve, where, in any organization, if there's a change of management or a new innovation, there's a huge amount of growth and learning. And then the challenge is when you apex of that success, what do you do next? Do you keep doing what you always did? Or do you say, okay, we need to get into this uncomfortable space of trying new things and trying to expand again? So getting comfortable, being uncomfortable, for me with the Dublin football team was one of the key strengths, I suppose, of the management team, that we were prepared to step into that space, to get different ideas from different people, different whether be it from business or sport, and from the players themselves, and try a few, and a lot of them wouldn't work. A lot of strategies didn't have success on the field, but we might have got some learnings from them, and that's the key bit is to have that continuous cycle of learning, and it's inherent in aviation. That's why it's so safe.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Well, because if we think about some of the examples that we've previously talked about on this show, we know about from the industry, that inability to change that impacts some of these organizations I mentioned earlier. And then when we look at, I'll give you one example we know about, Brad. We talked about this before a couple of years ago, and you may know this, Jim, yourself, just from on a consumer level. About two years ago or so, if you bought your phone, an Apple iPhone, in to get it repaired, and they changed, but not through an Apple not through an Apple authorized repairer, and if they change the little thing that tracks your finger, it takes your fingerprint. On the next time you updated the software, they actually Apple deliberately killed the phone, right? Because they recognize you didn't bring it into a proper their authorized repair. You brought it to an independent repair shop. It went kind of slightly under the radar because there was some other news going on around the same time. But pressure comes on, as you described. Pressure is now coming from legislators to introduce more and more kind of sustainable kind of legislation. And now, in the last month or so, 6 weeks, Apple come out and say, actually, we're going to make it possible for owners of phones to repair their own phones or go to an independent repair. So they've flipped. To be fair, they've done that themselves. I mean, they've done it under pressure, but they've reacted to the pressure. They've turned their strategy upside down and embraced it. And you look at, say, some of the things that likes of Oracle or IBM or SAP often do, and many others in our enterprise software world, and it's almost the exact opposite. They're not prepared to recognize that these things are changing, you know?
Yeah. It's a great example. You might have caught yourself and Brendan's eye there that the story about BlackBerry in recent weeks, and there was the front page of the Forbes back in maybe 1997, I think it was. It showed a BlackBerry, and it says who can stop the mobile phone king, something along those lines, Shatter. And the week previously, the CEO of BlackBerry was on the TV, and he was showing an iPhone, and he dismissed it and said, you know, what, that's just a gadget, like that's for the market. Yeah. And that fixed mindset, and BlackBerry, just the story is, for those who might know, BlackBerry just shut down all their systems now, their support systems for the phone.
Yeah.
And for such an iconic device, and we all had one back in the day, for such an iconic device to crumble, again, that lack of humility, I think, would be a part of it. But as you say, that other phone provider has adapted in this VUCA world. We're in a volatile, uncertain, complex world with lots of ambiguity. They've been able to adjust, which is, again, adaptability from a sporting context. You know, that's a key trait, key characteristics of any high-performing business or sporting team.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and we can think of one that in our industry, we think about IBM predicting the total market size for PCs, personal computers, like in the early 1980s. I think they estimated in a couple of 100,000. Yeah. So, you know, I talk about predictions going wrong. Be careful what you predict. Although myself and Brendan did okay earlier on our predictions last year about China and performance. I mean, be careful what you predict, and particularly if you're going to make a prediction and then back it up with investment and resources, because that's I kind of bring it back to the thing you talked about there about being safe. Because we've talked before, Jim, about, you've talked about it, you know, that's the company feeling maybe safe and maybe a little bit arrogant. And then within a business, though, for high performance, you've talked before about is it emotional safety? Isn't that what you've talked about? So there's a psychological safety. Yeah. Is there, so clearly there's a difference there. You need organizations to be high performance to have that psychological safety, but the organization needs to feel maybe slightly unsafe, I guess, always on its toes. Is that So just to explain psychological safety, and I'll speak, before I do, I'll speak about trust, which is a huge part. You know, we're talking about, you know, the characters of high performing teams. There's a trust there, particularly from the leadership group, the executive group in the business, or the coaching staff, and indeed from the coach staff to the players, and indeed the players or the employees in any business. You know, that trust comes from
it's trust is really because it's like a feeling. I can I build trust? Well, I can if I show levels of competence, of loyalty, of consistency, of integrity, my team, or I will give that institution, I say, well, okay, they're trustworthy. Now, there's lots of institutions in this country that I'd say I don't trust because they're incompetent, they lack integrity, they're disloyal, etc., etc. Same in business, same in sport. So trust is a huge part of that, and then being able to rely on your co-worker, rely on your teammate that they'll have your back. Psychological safety is a concept that we have here in aviation, and what it means is that we understand that humans first and foremost make mistakes, and as somebody who's involved in the regulatory space, so my particular role, we regulate civil aviation. We understand as regulators that humans make mistakes, and accidents and incidents, we see them, those as, even though they're tragic, they're opportunities for us to learn. And as part of our regulation in aviation, particularly in the commercial transport world, if I fly commercial transport aircraft, such as a Boeing or an Airbus aircraft with passengers, fee-paying passengers, if I make a mistake on the flight that affects the safety of the flight, I'm legally obliged, have no choice but to report that. That's the hard law, implementing rule that we transpose into Irish. That's hard law. I have to do it. And that's unique in most industries, to say, well, I made a mistake that will affect the safety of a product or the safety of my flight or the high performance in my particular area. And that psychological sense of safety comes that that when you do put, like in the classroom, put a hand up, it's not going to be smacked. Somebody's not going to jump all over me. And that's based on that mistake in the context of the training that's been put into me, my knowledge, my skill set. In the sporting context, it works as well. So on a football team, you understand as a head coach that players make mistakes. That's just, these things happen. Not that it's okay to willfully break rules, but we understand that, none of us are, well, if you think you're perfect, well, please let me know. And I'd love to know what the secret of that individual is. Perfection is like infinity. It's just on the horizon. Like you'll never we're in the globe, so you never reach the horizon. You just keep going around and around the earth. It's like infinity. It's just perfection is always beyond you, but high performance is within your reach. And to get to the high performance space, you have to be able to learn from those mistakes. And if you listen to any, and you're in a high performance business, I'm sure you've made lots of mistakes in your journey, and no doubt you've picked up on them and you've learned from them. And the same in high performance teams, they have that psychological safety where it's okay to share that message. Well, do you know what? I made a mistake, or I actually think in a team meeting, do you know what, Tomás and Ben, I think there might be a better way to do this. Now, that's just my opinion, but I'm allowed to advocate my position. And on the flight deck of an aircraft, when you have two pilots, you've got 4 ears, four eyes, 2 brains, for young people to advocate your position. Even though there is a command structure, there's a hierarchy, there's what we call a cupping gradient. There is a gradient in any executive team. You've got the CEO, maybe the experienced people, executives, and maybe not so experienced, but everyone has a say. And not that it's a kind of democracy. Obviously, the executive, somebody needs to make a decision, but need to inform that decision. And again, that applies to sport as well. So that psychological safety is a key enabler to grow as an organization. And from what I've seen, in aviation, in my time 20 years in the military, or in sport, it's a key of the high performing teams that I've touched. It's a key enabler.
Yeah. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. So just on that one, Jim. I mean, talk about humans making mistakes and presumably psychological safety. I should be able to put my hand up and say I made a mistake, and we move on, or we look at why I made the mistake. But you do hear in the sporting world, you watch a match of the weekend, and you hear the commentators say, if a player makes a mistake, they're going to see that on Monday morning. Monday morning when they do the video, that player is going to get a roasting, whether it's from Jim Gavin or Joe Schmidt or whoever. And in the business world, people make mistakes, and similarly, they might get hauled over the coals for that. Is that psychological safety where, I should be able to hear from my peers or from my managers that, you did something wrong. I'm going to point it out to you. in the same way you would, on a Monday morning, video review of a game? Is that the same thing, or is it?
It's a really good, really good question, Brendan. That transparency is key. But the good news is for the three of us, we're leading teams. If our team's underperforming, the buck stops with us. So, head coach, team is underperforming, the buck stops at me. Player makes, and there's, I'll just briefly talk about this from a sporting perspective. You've got, kind of broadly speaking, two types of errors. You've got technical errors where, Tomás is passing the ball to me and it's the right choice, but he doesn't execute the pass correctly, be it through the hand of rugby or whatever, by his foot in soccer. Tomás will go to the technical skills coach and say, well, what's Tomás's training program for his skills? Like, it's I understand Tomás can make mistakes. From our organization perspective, what are we doing about that? What have we done in the past about it? Have we identified there's a shortcoming there? How much training has he received? He might make the pass to me, but you know what? Actually, the better, and it looked executed really well, but the better strategy was actually to pass the ball to you, Brendan. So then you go, well, okay, go to probably the head coach in the area. So, well, he'd ask Tomás, why did you pass it to Jim rather than Brendan? Does he understand the game plan? Does he understand his policy and procedures in the organization? Does he understand what we need to do in this particular area? Defining the standards of performance are crucial in any, we can talk about the result looks after itself, but the bottom line is that we need to, define the standard of what is required, and then have we trained our people appropriately to reach that standard? Because you never, as executives, as an executive group, the organization will never rise to the level of our expectations. It'll always fall to the level of preparation and training that we've put into our teams, because they're the ones ultimately that deliver the results. Executives might think they do, and head coaches might think that they deliver results. The reality is, it's the football players. They're the ones who will get the touchdown, get the goal, get the try. How well they've been prepared by the leaders, by the executives, by the head coach, will be a reflection of how they perform. So then to go all the way back to the question you asked me about the Monday morning review, the Monday morning review is to understand, well, why were those decisions taken? And like, if somebody did a crazy pass in a game, in any sporting game, or a crazy decision in a business context, like in terms of gross negligence, that's a different matter altogether. That's like, hold on, what happened there? But if a genuine error was made, well, then we need to understand, well, do you not understand our procedure for this particular, how do we get this particular bit of business? How did you execute in that sales meeting? Let's review. We didn't execute the sale. Okay, well, let's talk through that sale meeting. And did you follow the following procedure we have, or the way we do our business? And that's the bit you want to learn from. So it's understanding that it's that two-way conversation, or if it's in a group dynamic, it's all about trying to understand what happened, why it happened, and then let's try and make, not sure that it won't happen again, but that we learn from it. And then, so the next meeting, we're in a much better place, or the next football match we're playing, we're in a better place to execute our standard of performance in that particular area.
And I suspect as well, Jim, that many of the big companies that we criticize here on the show had a lot of that in their business on the way up, and it seems to have fallen apart. They've lost it at this point. And that kind of, actually, what you point out with the psychological safety and the link to trust, actually, when you think of it from a customer perspective, and many people listening on the show are actually customers of these big companies. Yeah, they've actually lost trust in them. Isn't that what it is? It's actually, they've lost the trust of their customers. They've lost the trust of the market. We've talked about the share price, and of many of these big software companies. The ones that are doing well still retain the trust. We've talked about Microsoft. Some of their products are boring, but people trust them. And
because maybe, Tomás, that they have like that there's clarity on that standard performance, be it customer interaction, quality of product, out of our service. There's clarity on what we need as an org. This is our standard performance. This is what it is. Yeah. And we don't want you to go below it. That is our standard. That's what's required around here. And as you say, some organizations, they get bigger or have a lot of success, kind of begin to lose that edge, or lose that clarity, and get maybe the success creates a little bit of, I'm going to say, not lack of visibility, but there's kind of fog around it, what exactly it is. And the really good head coaches, executives, kind of keep going after it. This is what's expected around here. You know, I want to have, you know, we know what we're talking about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's a cracking way to wrap up the show, and I think it's a poignant point to all remember. And we've always said, like, we wonder, do they listen to our show? They should listen to some of this. It's good advice here. Thank you, Jim.
And it goes back to that principle, like, you know, sometimes when you get comfortable and the great Michelangelo phrase of, if you know how much hard work went into this, you know, you wouldn't call it genius. And I mean, that's a fella who's a bit like Bono. You just call it Bono, Michelangelo. You know, the famous people, like they're. I'm sure Bono as an artist puts huge amount of work, makes it look easy on the stage. Yeah. But behind the scenes, hours and hours of preparation and hard work. And that's again when people begin to feel a little bit safe, that they forget all the hard work and grafting that goes into executing the performance. Yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy. It never, you know, people say there's an easy All Ireland. You won an easy All Ireland championship there. Hey, I've never seen an easy one. Never.
No, there isn't an easy quarter. There isn't an easy All Ireland. There's nothing easy. No. Absolutely. You showed us the book there, Napoleon the Great, and that's a recommendation you gave me before Christmas. I have that. I've started it. I've read the first couple of chapters. I'm loving it already. It's actually for a book about an amazing man. It's a historical book. I thought it was going to be more academic. It's quite entertaining. It's well written. You have. Did you have it? You had another one as well, did you?
I've another. We were talking about softer skills there. Anton from Daniel Goleman, Goleman. Daniel Goleman is well worth a read. Yeah. I'm not saying, like, when we talk about softer skills, like when use the word softer skills, like your decision making process is part of your softer skills. You might have to make a hard decision on the business plan, on an employee, you know, tough decisions, but. So it's not just the word softer, kind of, I think, can sometimes be a little misleading. So emotional intelligence, I know we're wrapping up now. Another great book is, again, business book is Good to Great, Jim Collins. I'm sure you've come across it. Really, really good. The bit I would, you know, when I'm reading books, like you're tagging it, you're taking notes. For me, that's my technique. Good to Great is a super book, and I just wrote down some. Three points from Jim Collins' his book.
Yeah, please.
Which I think in the context of ties nicely into what we're talking. You're talking about some of those iconic organizations are just crumbling. He spoke about greatness is not a function of circumstance. Greatness turns out in largely a matter of conscious choice. So those conscious choices to have that fixed, do you have a fixed or growth mindset? Are you prepared to be uncomfortable and step into that space of developing your organization? Are you prepared to put training into your people continuously to help them grow and develop as not only as employees but as people as well? Because what I found in the sport and in the business context as well is that when you develop the person, you know, it has massive benefits to your organization, be it sporting or otherwise. The second bit of the book was Good to Great companies focus on, this is a really key one, and the same in sport as well. So great companies focus on what not to do and what to stop doing, equally as what to do to become great. So from a football perspective, there might be particular strategies. From a Dublin perspective, we weren't, you know, where we a counter-attacking team, now inherently it's in the players' kind of DNA in a club football in Dublin. It's a kind of attacking brand of football. But what do you do? What do you do really well? Jim Collins would say the really good companies focus in on that, and the other stuff, they just cut away the fat. And the last bit I'll say is, and I think this is really good, and I'll finish up on this. Good to Great companies build on a consistent system with clear constraints, but they give people the freedom and responsibility with the framework within the framework of the system. They hire self-disciplined people who don't need to be managed. Executives manage the system, not the people. And in high-performing teams that I've seen, and the pandemic has probably paradoxically given us the opportunity to step into the space about, if there was one word I would say in the leadership lexicon that I do lose is, you know, leaders have control. Well, leaders shouldn't have control. Control should be with the employees, should be with the football team. You create that framework and you manage a system for them to operate within. But within that, you give them, because if you've trained them well enough, and you've had absolute clarity on the performance standard, and you support them and give them all the assets and give them all the tools and give them all the encouragement, well then over to you. Execute the game plan. I'll give you the support. I'll give you the feedback. I'll encourage you. And in the remote working new world that we live in, the hybrid world, it's people want to own their context. They want to work late at night. They want to work first thing in the morning and have the day done by 12 o'clock. That's fine. Once you can execute, that's your context. Now this is your task. Now here's the performance standard. Now off you go. And the same with the football teams that I'd managed. That was the kind of the concept. As the self-disciplined people are, which is crucial. And your HR officer, director is probably the most important person in the organization. Getting the right people on the bus, and the people who want to grow and want to learn, and who have that self-discipline that you don't have to keep people looking over your shoulder, and to be in control. Give them. That's the leadership paradox that this world of, and hopefully we'll be coming out of this pandemic, that this world has forced leaders into. To be comfortable in this uncomfortable space where I'm not looking out onto the office, onto the shop floor, and I can see all my employees. They're remote. They're not in my reach. I'm not in control of them. If that makes sense. Yeah, the last book I have is from a good friend, Dr. Fergus Connolly, Game Changer. Fergus was he lives in the States, and in San Francisco. He's a high performance consultant. He was with the 49ers. He was with University of Michigan. He was at Liverpool. He was at Wales, but he was also with the Dubs in 2012 with the 21s, and with me in 2013. My good friend Bernard Dunn, the boxer, when he won his world championship belt, Fergus was his high performance coach, and he introduced me to him in 2011. So Fergus Connolly, Game Changer. Those involved in sport in general, high performance, couldn't but recommend that book. And as you can see, it's well tagged, and it's well tagged. It's well tagged for my coaching journey. So that's it.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Jim. You've left me there with the one thing that stands out, though. Greatness is a conscious choice. I think the opposite of that is also true. Possibly failure is also part of a conscious choice. Maybe that's the lesson that these big corporations, these crumbling organizations need to think about if they're going to stop the rot. So thank you, Jim. Fascinating conversation. High performance. We got to wrap it up there, Brendan.
Yeah, that was excellent.
Another week.
It's a shame to wrap that one up.
We're getting educated every time we have these amazing guests on.
I could stay on all day.
I know, it's amazing. Yeah. But this time we've got to go. I'll be talking to you after my US trip.
Yeah, have a good
after
trip.
Your Paris trip. We'll be talking to everybody again in a few weeks' time. Thank you and goodbye.
Bye-bye.